Hello everyone and welcome back to the Book of Knowledge. Today we're going to talk about basically what this channel is and what it means and how it works. We're going to talk about some things we've talked about in previous videos and tie it all back together. We're going to talk about some new things. There's going to be some new reveals in this video. But we're not going to read out of the book for this video. We're just kind of going to talk about things. If you're new to this channel, some of this might be weird to you. You're going to want to hit the subscribe button. You're going to want to hit the bell. You're going to want to watch the other videos if this is interesting to you. I'm going to try to make this so someone who hasn't seen any of the other videos can also follow along with this. So let's see how this turns out. Let's just get started. The first thing I want to talk about is the argument of science versus religion. So the first thing I'm going to say here is going to sound weird, but hear me out. First thing is science and religion is the same thing. Now, I know, hold on. But to understand this, you got to remember that we're talking about ancient people. We're talking about the people in the beginnings of civilization. We're talking about people who couldn't write things down. So, in order to retain information, when you can't write things down, you have to make up a story that contains that information within the story. Now, religious stories are parables. And a parable is a story that says something, but it really means something different. And all religious stories are parables. That's why Jesus talks in parables. All religious stories are parables. And the information that's coded and hidden within the parables, the true meaning of the parable is not the story and the characters of the story. The characters of the story represent something, and the details of the story represent the information. So what we find in these religious stories is the scientific knowledge of ancient people within these stories so they could retain the information without losing it. Like the stories of the ancient religions are the encoded scientific knowledge of those ancient people. And the people weren't allowed to know that information. Only the kings and queens and royalty and emperors and the people who were in charge kept that information from themselves and didn't give it to the people. Now the story that the people got, not the encoded science, but the story on the front of the parable, like the characters and their adventures and their trials, those are all stories about how to behave, how to be a good person, how to be controllable by the people in charge. We're talking about the beginnings of civilization. We're talking about violent tribal people who are civilizing and coming together around agriculture. But as people, we didn't have any experience living in large groups and accepting everyone around us. We were tribal warriors. So the big problem in the beginning of forming civilization is how do we keep all these people from not killing each other? So that's all these religious stories about how to behave and how to treat each other, and these are the rules, and Like even the 10 Commandments. There's 10 Commandments, that's all of these things are the reasons people start killing each other. And even the commandment about making idols is because in those early times when people made statues of their gods, it was a matter of time before they started sacrificing people to those idols. So, like even things like the 10 Commandments, that's don't do these things because people will start killing each other. All of these early religions are all about how do we take these tribal warriors, gather them all around these agricultural regions, and how do we all live together and not kill each other. Now, all of these religious stories, they began with people looking at the stars and noticing some of the stars didn't move with all of the other background stars. And those stars became the wanderers. Those stars became personified, and they became the gods. Now, because people were violent tribal warriors at that time, people wouldn't listen to other people because of egos and thinking their ideas were better, and people would click up into groups because that's human nature. That's what people did. So by making gods, you had a being that the people couldn't argue with. They weren't on the same scale. So nobody had an ego that was bigger than someone who was perceived as a god. So the gods was a way to enforce behavior without anybody being able to challenge it. Now, the stories were a personification of the planets and stars and their movements in the sky, and they would visit other constellations and other planets because of how they moved around in the sky. So these planets were personified, and stories were told about why they move the way that they move. And then those planets were given the names of the gods and personified in that way. Now the planet is a god, and that god went and interacted with this other god that's really a constellation. And there's a story about why they come together and why they fall apart. And now there's a story about what these gods did, but it's really a story of how these planets are moving around in the sky. Now the next layer to that is the scientific knowledge of the time is encoded into those stories. And when I say scientific knowledge, I'm talking about cycles of time, like seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, seasons, years, ages. All of the cycles of time were really important to ancient people. Also, human health, especially reproduction. Agriculture, how to grow plants, is encoded into these stories. Physics, astronomy, geometry, it's all of the science of ancient times is encoded within the details of all of these religious stories in all of the religions. Now, it's important to point out that, like, if you watch one of my videos, you'll make connections between maybe a letter, a number, a planet, a god, a story, all that interconnect with each other, and you walk away like, oh wow, that was cool, I never thought of it like that. But you're not getting the full picture. Once you watch 3 or 4 of my videos and the same thing happens in each of these videos, then you start to step back and you say, oh, I see there's something much bigger going on here. This isn't just, this is a coincidence. Look at how this happened. That always happens. And every letter corresponds to an ancient pictograph or hieroglyph. And every letter also corresponds to a planet, star, or constellation. And every letter corresponds to an ancient god who is a personification of the same planet, star, or constellation that the letter also represents. So what you're seeing is the formation of this grid of information, and each of these letters that we use in our alphabet comes from an ancient pictograph or hieroglyph that has a meaning. And then when you start putting these letters together and reading them by their meanings, now you're seeing how words are spelled. And spelling is putting a spell, putting intention into the word, and then casting it from your mouth. You're talking and putting spells on people. Now, I'd like to point out that previously we've talked about the letter L and how it represents Mars and the god Mars, and Ares, which represents Mars, and all the gods that represent Mars, they manifest in the letter L. And that's because the L comes from the Greek lambda, which is an upside down version of the letter V, which represents Venus. And when you put the lambda over the letter V, it makes the hexagram, or the Star of David, or the Star of Division, or the Star of Saturn that represents God. So here is a picture of Ares, or Mars, and there is the Greek lambda right on the shield. Now, I didn't make this picture. Would like to know who did make this picture, because out of all the symbols and things you could put on this shield to represent Ares, they put the lambda. So whoever made this horrible picture has great knowledge of exactly what I'm talking about, which we're going to get to a lot in the second book. Is all of this stuff that you're learning is not really secrets. It's only secrets from you and from me, because the media speaks this entire language fluently, and some people know it and some people don't. And here's another example of somebody using this language and nobody sees it. Now, moving on, we've talked about how the gods are the visible heavenly bodies: the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And sometimes constellations, Orion, certain stars, those are gods too. But the main gods are the sun and the moon and the visible planets. Now, we're going to take a step backwards now and zoom out, because what I'm going to show you now is the gods is a representation, the gods all together is a representation of a family. Now, the father god of creation is Saturn. The mother goddess of creation is the moon. So here we have Saturn and the moon as the father and the mother. Now, the sun is the sun. The father and the mother will have the son, who is a representation of the sun. The father and mother will have a daughter, which is the divine daughter, or the goddess, which is Venus. So right now we have the father, Saturn, the mother, the moon, the son, and the daughter is Venus. Now, Venus will leave the family and go marry Mars and start a family with Mars, because Venus is the goddess of love and war. Mars is the god of love and war. Ares and Aphrodite get together. All the Mars god ends up with the Venus goddess, and so Mars is the man that Venus will leave the family and go start another family with. Now, Jupiter is your friends, people who help you, people who are nice to you, the people you meet. Those are your friends, people on your side, people in your community. While Mercury is people who are not enemies, but people who will steal from you, trick you, do you wrong, treat you bad. Yes, your enemies too. So we have the father, the mother, the son, the daughter, the man the daughter will marry, your friends, and your foes. And that's the family of gods. These are all the people in close proximity to you in your life. And Mercury, which is your foes, that's the god of lying, stealing, cheating. We talked about that in the early video. Jupiter is your friends, the people helping you. We will talk about that in the future. It's, of course, all of this is in the book. But the family of gods, or the 7 planets, is a representation of basically the nuclear family and the people close to it. Okay, now I want to shift gears and really quickly talk about the number 6 and the number 9. I'm not going to go into great detail. The number 6 I already did on another video. It's the first video, and it goes into detail on the number 6. But what I'm going to say about the number 6 right now is basically the number 6 represents the snake of Saturn. It's the evil part of Saturn's duality. Well, not so much evil, but temptation, sin, sexual mischievousness, basically temptation. The 6 is the snake of Saturn, or Satan, you could say. It's basically temptation to sin, sins of Saturn. Okay, now the number 9 we haven't talked about yet. 9 is the number of nature. It's the heart of the factor 9 grid that all these sacred numbers come from. It's basically the good side of Saturn, what we would say is God, which is creation, it's nature itself, it's Mother Nature. The 9 is spelled with 2 N's, an N is the letter of nature, something new that nature makes. It's about coming into being. So where the number 6 is the dark side of Saturn, or evil, or deviance, the number 9 is the light side of Saturn, the creation, nature, goodness, the light as opposed to the dark. So the numbers 6 and 9 represent the duality of Saturn, the good and the evil, the light and the dark. And when you put the 6 and the 9 together, and you get 69, dude, and that has its own sexual meaning or whatever, but the 6 and the 9 don't really go together like that. They actually go together like this. You gotta turn it on its side, and then what you realize, you put the 2 halves of Saturn together to make a pictograph of Saturn. And just like the Greek lambda and the Latin V come together to make the hexagram, which is the symbol of God, here we have the 6 and the 9 coming together to form Saturn, or a symbol of God. Now, I had 2 more subjects to talk about on this quick little 5 to 8 minute video I was gonna do, and here we are, over 20 minutes right now, so I'm gonna end this here. So, if you're new to this channel and you made it this far in this video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, hit the like button, share this with your friends, post it everywhere. But more importantly, go back and watch the rest of the videos, because this is all part of one big thing. I know some people prefer like Egyptian gods to Greek gods, and so they'll watch this video and not that one, but you're not gonna get it then. You have to, even the videos, like literally you gotta read the book, because the book gives it to you in order, in a way you can process it. I'm just throwing stuff at you in these videos, but you know, of course I want you to get the book, right? So anyway, if you want the book, it's available on Patreon. It is not complete, it's almost complete, but you can download it now. I update it, I try to get to it once a week. And with that, I want to thank my Patreons I do have right now. Your support is awesome. I really appreciate it. I really hope you're enjoying the book. I know you are, because if you became a Patreon, you're interested in this. And if you're interested in looking, then you're finding out right now how deep this really goes. So, thank you very much. Your support is awesome. I also want to thank just all the people who subscribe to this channel and share the videos and just are interested in this. So you guys are awesome too. And with that, I think I'm out. So that's it.